Since childhood, we are taught to seek acceptance. We learn that being loved brings us security, that people's friendliness protects us against isolation and rejection. However, that teaching ignores a brutal truth. Love is unstable, mutable, conditional. It depends on emotional factors that are beyond our control. And a single mistake is enough for those who once showed affection to become the first to abandon us. The fragility of love becomes evident when we observe how quickly people change their opinions. Today, you may be admired, but tomorrow, a simple misunderstanding can transform that admiration into contempt. Whoever builds their authority hoping to be loved lives at the mercy of others, for they hand over their power to someone who can, at any moment, decide to stop loving them. This is a risky game in which people's emotional instability defines your destiny. On the other hand, respect is not volatile. It does not depend on momentary feelings, but on the recognition of your strength and intelligence. A respected leader may not even be loved, but they will be listened to, followed, and feared enough that no one challenges them without thinking twice. Respect is stability. Those who seek to be loved before being respected are making a fatal error. They are trying to govern based on something they do not control. Many who sought love and approval above all else were brought down precisely by those who once admired them. This is because excessive kindness can be interpreted as weakness, and weakness is an invitation to be exploited. When someone realizes they can push your limits without consequence, that person loses any respect they once had for you. Being too nice is a direct path to being ignored, disregarded, and eventually discarded. A strong leader does not worry about being liked. They worry about being respected. This does not mean being cruel, but rather having the courage to set limits and enforce your authority. If you care more about others' opinions than your own position, sooner or later, you will lose everything. Respect is earned through consistency, firmness, and the ability to act with strategic intelligence. Therefore, the greatest mistake you can make is to place love above respect. Those who earn respect may even be loved, but those who seek only to be loved will hardly ever be respected. And without respect, your influence is nothing more than a temporary illusion, ready to crumble at the first crisis. Why fear trumps love in the struggle for power? Machiavelli was straightforward. Between being loved and being feared, choose to be feared. But that does not mean governing with brutality or oppression. It means understanding that fear is a much more stable and predictable psychological mechanism than love. While love demands reciprocity, fear only requires that a person acknowledge their position relative to you. Fear has one characteristic that makes it more efficient than love. It creates psychological barriers. If someone loves you, that does not prevent them from betraying you when it is convenient. But if someone fears you, that person will think twice before trying to bring you down. Fear functions as an internal brake, an emotional lock that prevents impulsive actions against one who holds authority. However, it is important to understand that fear cannot turn into hatred. Hatred creates enemies, and enemies are dangerous because they act driven by a desire for revenge. A true leader knows how to balance fear with respect, ensuring that their presence is strong enough to prevent challenges without generating resentment to the point of inciting rebellion. That balance is what differentiates a strategist from a tyrant. The great leaders in history who knew how to use fear strategically built empires and maintained control for years, while those who relied solely on love were betrayed as soon as they showed weakness. Napoleon, for example, was loved by his soldiers, but it was his firm authority and his ability to inspire fear in his enemies that made him one of the greatest commanders in history. Meanwhile, leaders who sought only popularity, like Louis XVI of France, were devoured by their own people the moment they showed indecision. If you desire real power, understand this principle. Love is fleeting. fear is enduring. Love needs to be constantly fed, while fear sustains itself. If you might choose between being loved or feared, choose to be feared, as long as you do not cross the line into hatred. For one who is only loved is weak, and one who is only hated is doomed to destruction. The crucial difference between respect and hatred. Many people confuse fear with hatred, thinking that the more they are feared, the more power they will have. This is a fatal mistake. Fear is a powerful tool when well managed, but hatred is a destructive force that cannot be controlled. A leader who inspires only irrational fear will soon find themselves surrounded by enemies willing to do anything to destroy them. Respect arises from a combination of admiration and apprehension. People respect those who demonstrate strength, intelligence, and consistency. Respect means that your authority is recognized, that your words carry weight, and that no one dares to challenge you without good reason. Hatred, on the other hand, emerges when authority is seen as abusive, arbitrary, or unjust. Consider the great leaders in history. Julius Caesar was respected because, in addition to being a relentless commander, he also knew how to balance authority with strategic generosity. In contrast, figures like Robespierre, who ruled only through terror, ended up destroyed by the very system they created. Hatred does not build lasting legacies. It only prepares the ground for your downfall. The key to avoiding hatred is strategic predictability. People should not fear your unpredictability to the extent that they never know what to expect from you. If your leadership is based on random or excessive punishments, people will not respect you. They will only secretly wish for your downfall. But if you impose respect with balance, ensuring that your decisions are firm yet fair, your power will be much more enduring. Another essential detail: a respected leader imposes their authority without needing to demonstrate force all the time. Effective fear is the kind that exists without constant reinforcement. If you need to remind people that they should fear you, it means your power is already weakening. Those who truly master this art govern with few words and calculated actions. In the end, the question is simple: do you want to be feared or hated? Those who are only feared govern with stability. Those who are hated are only delaying their own ruin. The choice lies in how you manage your power and ensure that your fear is respectful and not oppressive. The psychology of fear: how to use it to your advantage. When used correctly, fear is one of the most effective weapons in building authority. It should not be based on brutality or chaos, but on the predictability of consequences. People need to know that crossing your limits will bring about undesirable results, but without turning the environment into one of paranoia and instability. The psychology of fear is based on a simple principle: human beings avoid risks whenever possible. If they believe that challenging your authority will lead to negative consequences, they simply won't try. However, those consequences must be calculated. Exaggerated punishments can generate revolt, while punishments that are too mild can be seen as weakness. A clear example of this is the way some companies enforce rules. A boss who excessively punishes employees only generates resentment, which can lead to sabotage. On the other hand, a boss who imposes no consequences for lack of commitment quickly loses the team's respect. The effective leader finds a balance. They are rigorous enough to maintain order, but without appearing as a tyrant. Moreover, fear must be supported by actions, not just words. If you threaten to act but never follow through, people will notice your weakness and lose respect for you. Similarly, if you set rules but do not enforce them, soon no one will take them seriously. Consistency is the foundation of strategic fear. The dangers of excessive kindness: when being nice means being weak. Society teaches us that being kind is a virtue, that kindness attracts reciprocity, and that those who treat others with gentleness will always receive the same in return. That idea is lovely, but profoundly naive. In reality, being excessively kind is often interpreted as a sign of weakness, and weakness is an open door to exploitation. Excessively kind people tend to be tested all the time. This happens because human nature is driven by self-interest. If someone realizes that they can take advantage of you without consequences, they will do so without hesitation. Boundless kindness turns the kind person into a target, a springboard for others to climb at your expense without ever reciprocating. Just look at history. Leaders who tried to govern solely with kindness and concessions ended up being betrayed, deposed, or even killed. Politics, the corporate world, and even social relationships follow the same principle. Whoever is always willing to give in is seen as disposable. Kindness without authority does not inspire respect. It only awakens the greed of others. This does not mean you should be cruel or inhuman. The true secret is to be fair, but never excessively indulgent. A leader who knows when to be strict and when to show empathy becomes unpredictable and therefore respected. They demonstrate that their kindness is not an invitation to be exploited, but a conscious choice that can be withdrawn at any moment. How to create strategic fear without sparking rebellion. When poorly managed, fear can turn into hatred, and hatred is dangerous as it causes people to act driven by emotion, often in irrational ways. The challenge is not just to inspire fear, it is to apply it in such a way that it does not generate deep-seated resentment and future betrayal. The first step in creating strategic fear is to establish clear limits. People need to know what to expect from you. If your reactions are inconsistent or excessively severe, they will begin to see you as a tyrant and eventually seek ways to bring you down. But if your rules are firm and predictable, they will be respected without the need for constant reinforcement. Another essential factor is the concept of fairness. Fear is sustainable only when people perceive that it is well-founded. If someone is punished without an apparent reason, it generates revolt. But if the punishment is fair and predictable, it will be accepted as part of the game. Intelligent leaders ensure that their power is seen as legitimate, not merely the result of brute force. Finally, remember that true power does not lie in demonstrating strength continuously, but in knowing exactly when and how to use it. Those who abuse fear create enemies. Those who use fear intelligently build lasting respect, and respect is what truly keeps a leader in control. The game of authority: when to demonstrate strength and when to step back. Many believe that authority must be exercised in a constant and aggressive manner, as if respect were guaranteed solely by absolute dominance. However, this is a strategic mistake. A leader who constantly imposes their strength becomes predictable, and predictability breeds vulnerability. True authority does not reside in the continuous demonstration of power, but in the ability to know when to use it and when to step back. Demonstrating strength at the right moment has a much greater impact than applying it indiscriminately. When a leader maintains control without having to reaffirm it constantly, their presence becomes more respected. Their actions carry much greater weight, because everyone knows that when they intervene, they do so with a clear and calculated purpose. On the other hand, a leader who never steps back also becomes an easy target. They arouse resentment, and the accumulated hatred can result in conspiracies, betrayals, and revolts. Knowing when to step back strategically without showing weakness is an essential skill for anyone who wishes to maintain power in the long term. The secret lies in alternating between flexibility and firmness. If you are too flexible, you will be seen as weak. If you are firm all the time, you will be seen as oppressive. The balance between these two forces generates respect and keeps your authority intact. Additionally, there are moments when stepping back can be a trap for your enemies. When you appear approachable and less rigid, those who wish to challenge you may lower their guard and expose themselves. Then, at just the right moment, your response will be even more impactful and decisive. The true game of authority is not about continuously crushing your adversaries, but about controlling the narrative of your leadership. Whoever knows when to act and when to wait, when to punish and when to reward, becomes someone who is impossible to overthrow. True leadership: the balance between being feared and respected. Being feared can guarantee obedience, but without respect, that obedience is fragile and temporary. A true leader does not settle for being feared. They strive to be respected as well. That balance is the key to enduring leadership. Respect arises from the perception of competence, intelligent decisions, and a firm yet fair stance. Fear prevents direct challenges, but it is respect that makes people choose to follow you, even when there is no coercion. The combination of both creates an undeniable presence. The great mistake of many leaders is to believe that fear alone is enough, but those who govern solely by fear are constantly in danger, for those who obey out of obligation will also look for ways to escape that domination. On the other hand, those who are only respected but do not inspire fear can be easily challenged. The key to balancing these two elements lies in consistency. If your actions are unpredictable and illogical, people may begin to hate you. But if your decisions are clear, firm, and calculated, fear becomes a tool of stability. Another essential factor is never allowing fear to turn into deep-seated resentment. Controlled fear maintains order. Uncontrolled hatred creates enemies willing to risk everything to bring you down. Machiavelli warned about this. The art of leadership is not about being loved or feared in isolation, but about knowing how to measure each according to what the situation demands. A leader who masters this balance becomes untouchable. They do not need to reaffirm their authority every moment, for their presence already carries the necessary weight. They are not a tyrant, but they are no fool either. They walk the fine line between respect and fear, and for that reason, they remain in control.